I haven't seen you before, then Happy New Year, everybody. And as always, just nice and easy as we start off. That's with particular sort of attention because it's been a little bit chilly and there's been a break and so on and so forth. So, but the usual thing, just beginning to pay attention to your body. Get a feel for the space within your body, whatever space there is. Just be aware of any areas of tightness or stiffness that may be making themselves known to you as you begin to move. And remember, don't strain against those areas. Just gradually letting your attention settle into your body. So various anchor points, as we might refer to them as. Your breathing, your overall posture, the feeling of the movement, feeling of your weight sinking down. And it's not necessary to sort of discriminate between those at the moment, or indeed those areas that are a bit stiff or a bit tight. But once you've started to get that feeling of settling, then it becomes a little bit more specific. So, you know, things like a nice upright posture, your weight sinking down, these are really fundamental to what we're doing. But at the same time, try and just get a sense for perhaps what you need at the moment. Excuse me. So it's good to think about these arts, you know, in terms of we can make a progression, we can develop these arts, and sometimes it's a good idea to think, right, this is my aim, or you know, I want to learn this exercise, or I'm going to practice this so I can develop this, or something or other. But don't think that that's all that we want to do. There are times also when, and I think this is one of them, where you know, we might want to just think, okay, what do I know? What can I do? And what's appropriate for me to be doing at the moment? And I say it this time because there's been the break for most of us and just getting back into the year and so on and so forth. But eventually, I think, you know, that sense of what do I need is perhaps a question that I always ask myself when I start to practice. And I also have in the back of my mind, you know, I haven't practiced that for a long time, or I need to work on that. But in the first instance, as I'm starting the day, it's like, well, what's going on? You know, so that I don't necessarily have a kind of set plan for that day at that time, because it might not be appropriate. Just trying to let your body settle into a nice steady rhythm, and that will be an outcome of the overall posture, but also of that quietening of your attention, that sense that your mind is settling, and with that, just getting away from any kind of, again, any kind of, I must do this, or I should do that, or trying to force something. The rhythm and the flow of the movements, which is such an attractive part of Tai Chi, are things that will emerge for us from correct posture, from moving well, from practice. They'll gradually build for us. But we can also focus on that rhythm, not to think, right, I've got to go 1, 2, 1, 2, or anything like that, but because the rhythm itself is actually quite restful. And then raising your arms. and just letting your hands drop down. So just beginning to let your weight roll forwards and backwards, swaying in the river. Imagine doing this in water. So there's that little bit of support and that little bit of resistance at the same time. Hands out to your sides and your hands following the movement. So when I'm forwards in my feet and my weight's just about behind the ball of each foot, I go back, see my hips go back, my shoulders go back, and then my elbows coming back, drawing my hands and my fingers back. Now I'm aligning my weight more or less over the front part of the heel there, the beginning of the heel. I go forwards again, and once again, shoulders, hips, elbows, wrists, and fingers. Just recognizing a neutral point in the movement, forwards and backwards, where at the front end and at the back end, there's a little bit of a kind of feeling of gravity pulling on you, pulling you forwards or backwards, depending on where you are. But in the middle, gravity is pulling you straight down into your feet. And even at the furthest extreme, not going so far that it becomes a fight with the pull of gravity. So maintaining a soft, supple quality within your body, not having to stiffen, not having to strain. And that just allows the movement to build. Get a sense for big bones of your skeleton and your legs and your spine and your arms, almost floating in the body. And try and get a sense for any areas of tightness or stiffness themselves. Also beginning to develop that sense of floating within the body, within your awareness of the body. So we find that there's a neutral point, and then this time, just see if you can come to rest wherever that is for you. Let your hips drop back a little bit more. Try and just release in the tail of your spine, lower back. So that allows your pelvis to adjust to your hips going back. You may find that the positioning of your weight in your feet changes slightly. Bring the hands around in front of you and then pushing up and sinking. So if you imagine from that point, that neutral point, wherever it happens to be, that there's a sort of a pole, like I don't know if they still do it, but the firefighters by repute used to slide down a pole when they had a call out. And it's almost like you're sliding up and down this image of a pole going up through your body, so that as much as possible you're maintaining an alignment. What you will find, in fact, is that there's a little bit of moving around. Nothing is constant. And it's a bit like riding a bike or even walking along. We rarely are able to maintain an absolute straight line. We kind of veer off and then we go back and we veer off again. So this alignment of the body shouldn't be seen as being fixed in that sense. It's quite interesting to try these exercises sort of outside in a high wind or something like that, because there are many factors that can affect us. And we're not machines, we're not robots, and we shouldn't try and perform as though we are. This is where, for people like ourselves with some useful experience in the background of these things, that an awareness of that quality of movement, the rhythm, the flow, the sort of sense of moving through water. I was going to say almost like the thickness of the movement. Are all indications that you're maintaining a fairly good posture, because they're difficult to maintain without that. Without the good posture, we have to constantly struggle to maintain the qualities like the flow. So we have a sort of feedback mechanism that we can be aware of within the body. Maybe even finding that we're actually beginning to respond almost quite automatically to that feedback. Training mind and body to come into good posture, to adjust how we're moving and behaving, to maintain that posture and the quality of movement. Always requires at some point some kind of conscious awareness, but also becomes quite intuitive, I find. And then the wild goose. There was, of course, a sort of checklist that we would go through. I'm not moving right, and there's certain things that we check. Are my feet in the right place, in the right position? Am I able to sort of align my weight and drop my hips back? Am I generally moving from the ground? Am I using my legs? So, for instance, if this is really making your shoulders burn at this stage, then it may be that you're putting too much effort into the shoulders, and you need to put more effort into your legs. There's no one correct answer here. And it may vary from movement to movement. Change into part in the clouds. Just aware that as you change from one exercise to another, as you move from one stage of an exercise to another, different parts of the body engage, and often engage in different ways. It's like there's a sort of dialogue going on between different parts of body and mind, changing according to the environment within which it's happening, which is the particular exercise that we're doing. So we start to realize that certain exercises may be good for our shoulders, our back, or whatever part of the body we feel that we need to release in, if there are any at all. Changing now to Dragon Plucks the Stars from the Sky. Try not to get so caught up with a particular part of the body or a particular thing that it cuts off your awareness of the holistic nature of what we're doing. So the background is always, posture, awareness, rooting down, so on and so forth. From that, certain things may emerge. Do one more on each side. And then when we change, just doing the first and the last section of pushing in forward direction. So facing forwards, pushing your hands up. And we'll come back down beside your hips. And then beginning to lift again, but letting your elbows drop. And pushing out sideways and back. On the side, you'll notice that when I push up there, my hands here, slightly in front of the body. I'm not doing this, leaning back or pulling my hands back. And when I push out, there, you see the palm of my hand, little finger is in line with my shoulder, my ear. And now I come back. So your hands don't go behind your body. That helps to maintain this very wide, so broad, long feeling in your spine and allowing the front of your body, ribs and belly to just release a little bit. Chest has a slightly concave feel. When we add the turning movements in, that should stay the same. So there's often a temptation to turn in the upper part of the body, in the shoulders or the upper back, or to turn our head, straining the neck, twist the shoulders around in one way or another. But that shouldn't be necessary. Again, this time we'll add the turn, but I'll show you from the side here. Do this in stages, first of all. Push your hands out to that same position and then turn a little bit in your hips. Turn back and bring your hands in. Try that in the other direction. Push out, turn, and back. So when I turn, doing it that way, I don't change the position of my arms relative to my shoulders. And then I would push out to the side. So this time we'll do it more flowing. But remember, once your hands are in position, just slightly in front of your shoulders, that's not going to change even if you do turn in your hips and your waist. So that maintains that positioning, that posture in the upper part of your body, the back, that stronger feeling, the front of your body with the internal organs and the rib cage and so on and so forth, where all the kind of action within the body, well, a lot of the action within the body takes place, isn't strained by the turning. So the movement, the energy can continue to flow in that way. If you twist up in your back, if you strain in your back, you'll create a blockage. As you get more experienced, you'll realize after a while that the shoulders do in fact travel a little bit further than the hips are moving. Your rib cage will travel a little bit further than your hips, not quite as far as your shoulders, because your body will gradually develop suppleness to allow that to happen without it becoming a strain. So that's just something that occurs rather than something we have to make happen. And last round of this one, hips sinking back, pelvis hanging down. Last time. And then letting your hands drop, circling palm. Now the same thing, same approach, should be used in this exercise. You see my hand, you can see my hand coming down in front of my body, not pulling back. If I push up, and this is a very common habit, and I pull my hand back, actually it would go down there, wouldn't it? Which is completely wrong. It could only go so far down there. And then when we add the turn, same idea. We get to this position here, we turn, the hand remains in position, and come straight down. Once again, if you're finding that without having to strain, there's just a slight sense as you turn of your hand coming across a little bit more, that's fine. Just make sure it's not stiffening up in your back or your shoulder. Good, and then switching sides. And then again, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. Okay, and then rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. Hips going back, shoulders going forwards, hands following your shoulders. Very careful as always with your back, your knees. Remembering that crucial element that it's our hips going back, not the shoulders going forwards, that we really want to focus on. If you're focusing too much on shoulders and head and arms going forwards, you'll fall over. If you're going to fall in any direction, I'd rather you didn't fall at all. But at least if you find yourself being pulled backwards, you'll know that you're doing the right thing, but you're just doing it a bit too much. Same thing as we go into polishing the table, which we'll change to after this one. The additional element that there's a turn in movement, hips go back, you turn again, and the hips tuck under. That's very important that you think about this, because what we don't want to do is to bend the back and twist the back at the same time. That can be very painful. I did actually do that once, not doing an exercise, but ironically doing my shoelaces up. And it's a very good way of putting your vertebra out. Whereas if you do it like this, that shouldn't happen. So it's moving from this central part of your body and moving carefully. This is not a competition. One more time, in each direction. Come to the upright position, and again, just letting your hands swing around. Sometimes a faster movement like this can help you to get a sense of releasing in areas that have tightened up. It's lovely to do the slow movements, but sometimes it can feel slightly torturous, struggling to move. Sometimes a little bit of momentum can actually help the energy to flow more freely. But even here, of course, it's a smooth momentum. It's not a sort of frenetic movement. There's a sort of quieter quality that comes from the rhythm of the movement. And you can just let the movement fade away, and then go back to this movement swaying in the river for a few moments, just to get a sense for how it feels after having done just a familiar range of exercises. It may not feel any different, but there may be different things that you become aware of. And then just slowly to a halt. Give your legs a shake. Good. Staying in the parallel stance and hands in front of your shoulders, sinking down and pushing up. So we're going to go into bear play, but we're going to take it in nice easy stages, so that with each stage that we add on, it's like if you're kind of stacking up books, each book rests on the one below it. So we want to get each book level and in the right place, and then know where the stack is, so that we can put the next book on correctly. It's a bit like I sometimes think, we focus on one thing and then we pull back. It's like a camera panning back in a documentary film. You start off with a tree or something, and it pans back, and suddenly there's a whole landscape there. And our awareness does the same thing. So the moment it's your feet going up and down, but then as you do that, your elbows get pushed out. We know that the movement in the body will begin to move the arms. And in the position that your hands are in, once again, you'll see that the elbow is just on the side. It's not pulled back. And that means you can just about see my chest in front. So this time you push up, and then so though you're drawing the sternum, the chest bone back, and that brings the elbows forwards. And then you push the chest out. I'm exaggerating this, by the way. My head is moving around too much. But you'll see, hopefully from here, what's happening in my upper back, my chest. And as I go into a more correct movement, it doesn't happen, you don't see it as easily, but I can still very much feel that. And then the next layer, as it were, is to turn in your hips. So turn towards your left. So you swing into your right foot and your right elbow comes down in line with the right leg. Push up again and then drop into the left in the same way. The other thing, and it's not quite so clear, I'll try and do it from the side, but your elbow goes forwards. Again, I'm exaggerating that. It doesn't come across the body, it goes forwards. So here, as I turn, the tendency is for my elbow to be pulled this way. But in fact, my intent is to push the elbow a little bit forwards. As though what you'd like to do is to drop your elbow down onto your knee, onto the knee below it, rather than come across your body. You won't, well, I shouldn't think you'll be able to drop your elbow onto your knee. I certainly can't. Have to go down a long way to do that. You see, elbow, knee, as opposed to this, where now you can see my elbow is not in line with the knee. Body expands and contracts. And then the final stage is here. Turn your hand palm forwards and just let your elbow push your hand out again in the same direction as the elbow was pointing. And we have the exercise bear play. When we do it like this, it's interesting because even as we contract downwards, because your chest is sort of moving in one direction, but your hand is very gently pulling against it, your arm and your hand very gently pulling against it. There is an opening on the inside of your shoulder and in your chest. If you were in the session on Thursday, I was talking a bit about the chest and the breathing. This is another exercise that can help with that, because just here, there's that opening. But you won't get it if your hand is here. It will happen if it's here, but not here. And it's a good example of where watching the movement, being precise in your interpretation of that movement, really helps to develop the benefits that we accrue from the movement. So bear play. Now it's a circular movement, so all directions are involved, up, down, forwards and backwards. This is for your arms, that is. But there's a sort of emphasis on the downward movement. It's like riding a bike again. When we push the pedals down, and when we do that, the opposite side comes up, of course. And when the pedal goes forwards, the opposite side goes back, and so on and so forth. So there's an emphasis here on the downward movement. We're going to change that. We're going to do pressing palms, or circling hands, or palms. Various translations of the term. So this time bring your hand up, and this time place the emphasis on the forward stage of the movement. You see here, because of the way this works, hands pass by each other. I sometimes do this exercise without moving the weight, but I want you to move the weight when you do it this time. It's quite a tricky turn, so if you find it difficult, don't bother. Because when we come to do a similar exercise with pulsing the monkey in the bow stance, the forward stance, the weight will move then. One more on each side. Okay, and check out. It's important to realize that these arts are really precisely defined. There's a mechanical element to what we're doing. It's only one element, but it's a vital element. So again, I use the analogy of a bike. Think about any machine, any piece of mechanics that you use. It could be a sewing machine or even a can opener or anything that you use in the kitchen or in just in everyday life. If it's bent, if you go to use the can opener and the point's been bent, you're not going to be able to use it. It's not going to work so well. And so, there's always a relationship between, if you like, function and structure. So that's one reason why we pay so much attention to structure, because if the function of your body is to, say, breathe or to digest food or to get the energy to flow or something like that, then if your structure is out, then that's going to make it more difficult. You're going to have to put more effort, may even end up straining to achieve that. It's not the only factor by any means, but it is a key factor. You can have everything else in place. Your diet could be perfect, your lifestyle ideal, blah 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 blah. But if your rib cage is tight, you may well still experience problems with breathing, for instance. Another reason for maintaining the precision of the movement is because it's a way of engaging the mind and not just randomly doing the exercises by rote while you're thinking about something else. And that clarity, that precision that we get through mind and body is also one of the big benefits and one of the big things that we move forwards with in Tai Chi and Qigong. People sometimes ask about progression. The question always arises, what about the advanced exercises? And those of you who have asked me that question or heard me being asked that question will know that my answer will always at some point involve, you've already done them. It isn't necessarily a case of learning more and fancier and more challenging exercises. This is really about kind of how we do these exercises. I do quite a wide range of exercises. I teach quite a wide range and different practices and so on and so forth. Some people don't. They teach a much narrower range of exercises. That doesn't mean that kind of one of us is right or wrong, but it means that it's possible to develop these arts without necessarily having a great variety to choose to work with. Now, 1 foot forwards. Front toes point straight ahead. So not there, but there. And the back foot, the angle should allow you to sit back comfortably with the hip nice and open, but still face the front. So if I'm like this, I go back, I'm sort of being pulled this way a little bit. If I'm like this, I go back and it's a bit tight to sink my weight. Feet are hip width apart and about the same in length. So you can see my heel is in front of my front heel is in front of my rear toes, not like this. If I'm like this, then as soon as I start to move, it's like I'm falling off my stance. So we want a posture that isn't so big that we're having to really stiffen, strain to move the weight, but not so small that it restricts the space that we have for movement. And then just transferring your weight forwards and backwards. So it's not a big stance, but make sure it's not too small. I sometimes say to people, if you were out for a walk and you came to a stream and there were 2 sets of stepping stones crossing that stream, one set is tiny, but the other are quite big. Which set of stepping stones are you going to choose? If you wanted to show off to your friends, or you didn't mind getting your feet wet, you could use the small ones. If you wanted to make sure your feet stayed dry, then you'd use the big ones because there's just more space for you to land on. So the percentage of your weight When you go back, it's to about 70%, no more than that. And when you go forwards, do about 60%. And again, notice the alignment of my body. I hope. Yeah, that's all right. I'm not leaning forwards or backwards, which is a very common habit, but this is, for the moment, very much about our legs. It's said that the upper body sits on our hips when we do this. And that's a good starting point. But actually, what we think of as our upper body isn't passive when we do this. And if we apply an image like moving through water, or again, you imagine you're doing this against a strong wind, then you realize that your body, the whole of your body is moving as one unit. And in order to maintain that, all sorts of adjustments have to take place, not just in your legs, but all the way through your chest and belly and back and sides as well. Raising your toes and your heel. Remember that the raising of our toes is actually just a simple flexing of your ankle, just this movement. Your heel coming up is an extension of the ankle, this movement. Neither of those two movements need involve your shoulders or your back. Neither of them should need you to stiffen up or to strain, so long as you've got the correct alignment and your weight is sinking down. And then stepping in. Remember also, I mean, just in passing really, if we did want, for some reason, our shoulders to go forwards, you know, maybe we're going up a hill, or maybe the bus is coming and we're just picking up our speed a bit and using that angling of the body to help us move forwards a bit with a bit more momentum, a bit more speed. Actually, rather than leaning forwards, we've always got that option that we explore in rowing a boat in the middle of the lake and polishing the table, of counterbalancing the movement forwards just a little bit with our hips going back. So we can begin, if we wanted to, we could begin to project our center of gravity without risking falling. Shake out. And this is a very common thing in walking. If I'm walking to the shops, I'm not going to do this and then very carefully, I'd never get there. I want a little bit of momentum, a little bit of help from my center of gravity and the pull of gravity. So what I do is I just let my body go forwards a little bit, my upper body. My center of gravity is now there and it's going to pull me forwards. But at the same time, I don't push my hips right back, but I don't just do this because now I'm falling. So there's the same kind of tilting here. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but here, now I can just allow myself to go forwards, but I've got a countermeasure in case I go too far. That sort of movement of the hips that as I say, we explore in other movements. Now have your other foot forwards. So when we do that, we're still not straining in our shoulders. We're still not stiffening the back. And even if we were in a real hurry and we were doing a sprint and really leaning forwards, we still wouldn't want the stiffness in our shoulders, because when we sprint, when we run, we use our arms as well. And if you're stiff in your shoulders, you're not going to be able to use your arms to help to build the speed of the body. We're not doing either at the moment. We're moving in that upright stance. This is the the central position. And like in the other exercises, we establish a quality, a feeling, an awareness of how it feels to move like this. And then when we move out from that, either in our daily lives or in particular exercises, we have a sort of anchor point. We have a baseline that we can come back to. Raising your toes in the heel. Stepping in. Having established a good stance, a good position for our feet, we want to try and make sure that we can maintain that. So when we step out, we feel our way out, trying to get the foot down in the same position. So one way to develop that is, I'm going to put something on the floor because I haven't got many marks on the floor, but if you've got a carpet on the floor or something like that, and there's a particular point there, you sort your stance out there, and you can see I'm sort of lining up my foot with the object I've just put there. And I go back, and what I want to be able to do, as near as possible without having to look, sometimes I want to look, is to get my foot back in more or less the same position, just slightly behind that. You won't get it every time, but so that you instinctively and intuitively go to the same position. That's quite a useful way of training, I find. But I say, go into your kitchen and have a look down at the floor. There's bound to be something where two tiles join, or something like that. So now, from this position, when we go to do the walking, you imagine parallel lines, tram lines, we refer to them as, going across the room, and we're either going to go forwards or backwards, but either way, the empty foot comes in, forwards and out. If you're going forwards, it's the heel goes down first. If you're going back, it's the ball of the foot that goes down first. Front foot is slightly turned out, which will mean that it's not exactly that position, but importantly, we maintain the length and the width of the step. And then going back. It's interesting that recent information that has come from the NHS about moving around in slippery conditions like ice. It's interesting, there was an advert, the suggestion was walk like a penguin, because penguins tend to have quite wide stances and take quite short steps. But what penguins do, of course, is they wobble around, something like that. If you do Tai Chi, you can do all that without having to wobble around. Okay, have your right foot forwards. Think about, we're going to do fisherman castanet. And this is very similar in many ways to swaying in the river. Hips go forwards, shoulders go forwards, arms follow. There's that little bit of contraction and expansion in chest and upper back, beginning to move the arms. So we found that when we did bear play. Nice and easy and gently. And when we did pushing in 4 directions, I commented that your hands will stay, your arms will stay in front of your shoulders. So you're not straining in your chest, which would restrict your breathing. And the same thing is true of repulsing the monkey. So now we go back and you leave your right hand in front, you turn and the left hand comes up and it's in front of the shoulder. You push forwards. Turn, and this is quite tight turn, but the hand is still in front of the shoulder. You can see it naturally comes to that position. If I pull my hand back, it's going to end up over here somewhere, and actually it's quite painful on the shoulder. Don't do that. I twisted my shoulder up then. That maintains the flow of the energy through chest and upper back and out into your arms. And so it maintains the flow of the movement. The movement becomes more sustainable. If we think, well, it's a nice flowing movement, I'm going to move my arms a lot, you'll get tired very quickly and probably end up with stiff shoulders. Good. Shake out. Left foot forwards. Starting with fisherman casting net, which I always think is a very archetypal movement. There's just a slight suggestion here that the hands are behind a little bit, but they're low down. And it's not so much you've moved your hands behind as you've moved your body forwards. Now you're pulling on your hands and you get that opening in the front of your shoulder, which then contracts to help bring your arms through. And it's only for a moment. You're not doing this, you're not straining. So occasionally the hands do go behind the body, but in very specific exercises. And that enables us to use the natural elasticity of our body that develops to help to actually move the arms. But it's generally only in very simple exercises like this. We're not doing anything, not trying to do anything clever. We're not swinging our arms in circles or anything like that for this one. And then repulsing the monkey, left hand stays in front and just comes up to a little below shoulder height. A quiet feeling in your arms and your hands, just allowing them to be led by your body. So we're maintaining those qualities of the posture that allow for movement, both the, if you like, the mechanical movement of the body, internal movements of breathing, digestion, all physical processes seem to involve some form of movement on a visible level or on a microscopic level, and of course the flow of the energy in and through the body. Good, and then bring your feet parallel. And again, give your legs a nice shake. Excellent. So rubbing your hands together. Again, slightly faster movement that can help to just get rid of some of those areas that may feel a bit stiff or tight still. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Around your hips. Nice and light on the belly. The upper part. Coming back to the standing posture. Hands down by your sides, just aware of the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. Letting your hips sink down. Push up, still aware of the weight of your arms, but aware of the push up. Moving them for you. Bringing them around, drawing in, sinking down, not hurrying this part of it. Once again, just for a moment, see if you can feel that genuine weight of your arms before you begin again. One more round. And just that. Shake it. Excellent. So lovely to get started. I mean, this is my first full week back, so I'm hoping that